The May 16th coup was a military coup in South Korea in 1961, organized and carried out by Park Chung-hee and his allies who formed the Military Revolutionary Committee, nominally led by Army Chief of Staff Chang Do-yong, after the latter's acquaintances of the day of the coup. The coup rendered powerless the democratically elected government of Yoon Bo-seon and ended the Second Republic, installing a formacist military Supreme Council for Nation and Reconstruction, effectively led by Park, who took over as chairman after General Chang's arrest in July. Park Chung-hee was a South Korean president and military general who led South Korea from 1961 until his assassination in 1979. Park seized power through the May 16 coup, a military coup that overthrew the Second Republic of South Korea in 1961 and ruled at the head of Supreme Council for National Reconstruction until his election and inauguration as the President of the Third Republic of South Korea in 1963. In 1972, Park declared martial law and recast the constitution into a highly authoritarian document, bringing in the Fourth Republic of South Korea. After surviving several assassination attempts, including two operations associated with North Korea, Park was assassinated on 26 October 1979 by Kim Jae-gyu, the chief of his own security services. He had led South Korea for 18 years.
In 1961, Military General Park Chung-hee and his aides led a military coup to take over South Korea, which would went on to shape the history of South Korea. In 1963, General Park Chung-hee restored some political freedom and declared control over the Third Republic Party of South Korea. Later on, in 19 Park increased his powers with constitutional changes. One of his plans included martial law, which was changing normal law to military law. In 1979, everything began when the followers of Kim Young-sam marched into cities protesting as Kim Sam was expelled from the National Assembly. Kim Jae-koo, the KCIA officer who was in charge that time, failed to control the demonstrations because he had to kill 30,000 protesters, which he didn't want to. This created a conflict between the President Park Chung and Kim Young-sam, which later led Kim Young. After the death of Park Chung-hee in 1980, the General Chung Do-hwan forcefully seized power over the government, and according to his order in the city of Gwangju, the army killed at least 20 students. In 1981, General Chung Do-hwan ended Marshall Plan and indirectly elected himself to a 7-year term as president. Then, in 1986, the citizens of South Korea decided to change the constitution and allow direct election of the president. In 1987, President Chung, pushed out of office by student unrest and international pressure in the build-up to the Sixth Constitution. General Roh Tae-woo succeeded President Chung, greater degree of political liberalism, and launched anti-corruption drive.
Anti-government protests began in late October, early November in 1983. South Korean university students have surged with demonstrators using bolder tactics to confront authority. One event that stood out the most was when 264 students from 3 different Seoul universities stormed the Democratic Justice Party headquarters. The students had control of the building for 13 hours, which they used the time to issue a long list of demands for the democratic changes before being escorted away by riot police. Demonstrations at universities intensified as well to resist the authoritarian government of President Chun Do-hwan by going to the streets and uniting with workers. Students from Seoul International University marched in an industrial area demanding improved conditions for laborers whose wages were kept low during the South Korean economy boom. Factory assembly members were detained. 350 students from Seoul National University took over the offices of Democratic Korea Party, the main opposition party that the government allows to exist legally. The students held the National Assembly virtually captive until they promised to press for political change. The difficulties facing the Chun government over how to deal with dissidents were underscored Friday by a gun battle in the Korean demilitarized zone, north of here between North Korea soldiers and guards under the United Nations command. 4 soldiers were killed in the battle, 1 South Korean and 3 North Korean. In the past, South Korean regimes have considered such events as demonstrations of their strict control over political expression in the midst of unpredictable North Korean behavior. Thus far, students have gotten limited support from the general population. However, they do have supporters amongst political moderates. These political moderates are hesitant to speak out themselves, but see the youths as the only driving force for strong anti-Chun sentiment, which is tolerated by officials to some extent. The government has alternated lately between giving its opponents a longer leash and warning of crackdowns if dissidents goes too far. For example, buses full of riot police were visible throughout Seoul. Students were involved in the occupation of the third-party headquarters were treated harshly to the extent where riot police demanded women to remove their clothes. On the other hand, party leaders this weekend urged merciful treatment for the jailed protesters and they have agreed, at least to some extent, to demands by the students for the right to elect their own campus councils. The only organization allowed now is paramilitary student defense corps chosen by the authorities. At this point, the election was likely to be held in February. President Chun was pushed out of presidency by student unrest and international pressure in the development of the Sixth Constitution. General Roh Tae-woo succeeds Chun, grants greater degree of political liberalism, and launches anti-corruption drive.
The Gwangju massacre was one of the main events that led to the demise of President Chun Do-hwan. The Chun Do-hwan government issued a report stating that 144 civilians, 22 troops, and 4 police officers had been killed in the Gwangju uprising. Anyone who disputed their death toll could be arrested. However, census figures reveal that almost 2,000 citizens of Gwangju disappeared during this time period. A small number of the student victims, mostly those who died on May 24, are buried in Mangon-dong Cemetery near Gwangju. However, eyewitnesses tell of seeing hundreds of bodies dumped in several mass graves on the outskirts of the city.
The event of South Korea resisting against military rules has many effectiveness long-term impacts, and one of those major impacts is having political unrest throughout this whole event. As none of the leaders were elected fairly and there was no peaceful method all over the country. After the death of Park, the next leader, who was General Chung Do-hwan, who seized power from Park after his death, was also not fairly elected, and therefore there was no peaceful method of power transition.